Hello guys, my name is Subhak Gupta and I am the final year student of BCom Honors in Shaikh Bhagat Singh College. Today I'll be discussing the topic of offences and penalties under CGST Act with you. So I have a PowerPoint presentation through which I'll be explaining the whole topic. Here it is. So let's get started. So first of all, let us understand what will be the flow of the presentation. The flow of the presentation is as follows. First, I'll give you the overview of why offenses and penalties are needed, what it is, then what do we mean by offenses, and what do we mean by penalties and the provisions under the CGST Act, which relates to both offenses and penalties. So let's get started. So first of all, we must understand the objective of law may be served only if it is being implemented properly and followed by the people strictly. And in order to give justice to tax abiding people, the provisions to take strict action against offenders are required. Therefore, the law always enumerates the offences and corresponding penalties. This is done to give equal rights and opportunities to both the parties, that is, the tax authorities and the assessee. The right to pursue the case against the order is called the right to appeal. So, the sections 122 to 132 of CGST Act give the provisions for offenses and penalties under GST. So let's start with offenses. Offense in general means a breach of law or act or any illegal act which is punishable under law. Sections 122 to 138 of the CGST Act defines offenses and penalties under GST. There are types of offences according to section 132 subsection 4 and subsection 5, namely cognizable and non-cognizable offences. The prosecution is the institution or commencement of legal proceedings, that is the process of exhibiting formal charges against the offender. To institute the prosecution, offences are classified as cognizable and non-cognizable. So, as a broad overview, the cognizable offences are serious category of offences and thus they are non-bailable. The non-cognizable offences are less serious category of offences and are bailable offence. So let's see what exactly are the differences between the two. So starting with cognizable offence, in these type of offences, the authority, the officers which are authorized to make arrests can arrest the offenders without a warrant. Then these are non-bailable and these are serious offenses. So let's see what all are the offenses covered under cognizable offenses. So the subsection 5 of section 132 of CGST Act specifies four types of cases as cognizable and non-bailable under CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST, and whole of the GST compensation cess and the whole purview of GST. So this is when the amount of tax evasion or the input tax credit or wrong refunds or any amount relating under GST exceeds rupees 5 crores and it is punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 5 years or with fine. So the first offense is supply without bill, that is supplies of goods or services or both without issue of any invoice in violation of GST law or rules with the intention to evade tax. That is, the supplier was supposed to issue the invoice, but he didn't issue the invoice and he supplied goods or services and the amount of goods or services exceeded rupees 5 crores. Next offense is billing without supply. That is issue of invoice or bill without supply of goods or services or both, leading to wrongful availment or utilization of input tax credit or refund of tax. That is, the supplier is not supplying the goods but is issuing invoices or bills just to avail input tax credit or to evade tax or just to do something wrong with the act, with the provisions of the act. So the next offense is wrong input credits on bills without supply. So basically, the person avails input tax credit using invoice or bill referred to in point number two. The point number two was when the bill was issued without the supply of goods or services or both. Then the last cognizable offense under GST is tax collected but not deposited. So that is a supplier collects any amount of tax but does not deposit it beyond a period of 3 months from becoming its due to be deposited. So basically what the supplier is doing, it is collecting the tax from the customers and not depositing it to the government. Hence, the supplier, is cheating both the government and the customers. So let's move back to the differences. Now coming to non-cognizable offenses, they are less serious offenses, and in these type of offenses, the authority which can arrest the violators can't arrest without warrant. These kind of offenses are bailable. And as I said, these are relatively less serious offenses. And all the offenses specified under section 132, except cognizable and non-bailable offenses, come under the category of non-cognizable offense. Now let's move on to penalties. The word penalty is not specifically defined in GST, and so it takes the meaning from various judicial pronouncements and principles of jurisprudence. A penalty is a punishment imposed by law for committing an offense or failing to do something that was the duty of a party to do. A penalty can be both corporal or pecuniary, civil or criminal. So in GST, both corporal, that is jail, and pecuniary, that is monetary penalties are applicable under GST. So basically, a person can be both imprisoned and can be fined as well for any of the offenses that are made in under the purview of this act. So under any law, I mean, this is a general statement that I'm making here. Under any law, the penalty provisions are always designed in such a manner that higher amount of penalty is levied on offenses with fraudulent intention. So there are, say, two offenses, but one is, say, an offense which was done by some error, or on the other hand, there is an offense which was made due to fraudulent intentions. So in the offense, in the latter case, where the offense was done with the fraudulent intention, in those offenses, the penalties would be higher than the other case where the intention of fraud was not present. Moving forward, the according to section 122 subsection 1, there are 21 offenses which are listed where those offenses are subject to the penalty of rupees 10,000 or the amount of tax involved, whichever is higher. So what are these offenses? Let's see. So the first one being supplying goods and or services without issuing an invoice or issuing an incorrect or false invoice. Next, issuing an invoice without supplying of goods or services, collecting tax but failing to remit to the government within 3 months of the due date, collecting tax in contravention of law but failing to remit it to the government within 3 months of due date, failing to deduct tax or deposit the tax with the government, failing to collect tax or collecting too little tax from the supplier at the time of payment, or failing to pay the tax to the government. And it applies to e-commerce operators. So if we relate all these points, we'll notice that we just discussed these points under cognizable offenses. So yes, the these same offenses come under the category of cognizable offenses. But the main point of distinction between the two is that these offenses to be classified as cognizable require that the amount of the tax evasion or the amount of the tax that is involved in these offenses exceeds rupees 5 crores. So say a person supplies goods or services without issuing an invoice or issuing an incorrect or false invoice, supplies some goods and the tax amounting to for those goods is say rupees 12,000. In that case, he'll be charged the penalty of rupees 10,000, 12,000 only. But if the amount is really high and it exceeds rupees 5 crore rupees, so in that case, the offense would be cognizable offense and hence it will become a serious issue or a serious offense. So moving forward, the other offenses in the list of 122 subsection 1 are obtaining a refund of tax by fraud, then distributing an input tax credit other than in the manner prescribed, falsifying or substituting financial records, producing fake accounts and or documents, or furnishing a false return, then failing to obtain registration if registration is required, then furnishing false information during registration, obstructing an officer from the discharge of duties, transporting taxable goods without documents, suppressing turnover leading to evasion of tax, failing to maintain books of accounts and documents, failing to furnish information to CGST, SGST officers, or furnishing false information, supplying and or storing goods which one has reason to believe are liable for confiscation, then issuing an invoice or document by using the identification number of other person, or tampering with material evidence or tampering with any goods that have been detained, seized, or attached. Then, in addition to any action that may be taken under Section 122, failure of an e-commerce operator to furnish all required information could lead up to lead to penalties of up to rupees 25,000. Moving forward, according to Section 122, subsection 2, any registered person who supplies any goods or services or both on which any tax has not been paid or short paid or by mistake refunded, or where the input tax credit has been wrongly availed or utilized. There exist two cases. Case 1, for reason of fraud or any willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade tax, the penalty is rupees 10,000 or tax due, whichever is higher. The other case is that these things happen when like a registered person supplies any goods or services or both on which any tax has not been paid or where the input tax has been wrongly availed, but it is not done due to fraudulent intentions or willful misstatement, then the penalty amounts to rupees 10,000 or 10% of the tax due, whichever is higher. Then a penalty is also prescribed for offenses where the person is not directly involved in any evasion, but may be a party to evasion or fails to attend summons or produce necessary documents. In such cases, the penalty would be up to 25,000 rupees. Moving on, there are certain specified people as per section 150 who are required to furnish information return. And if they fail to do so, they will be served a notice requiring them to furnish the information return within a period not exceeding 90 days from the date of service of notice. If the person still fails to furnish the information return, then a penalty of 1,000 rupees per day applies, subject to a maximum of 5,000 rupees. This is what section 123 says. Then, according to section 124, if a person fails to furnish statistics or willfully furnishes false statistics, the following penalties may apply. First, if this is the first time offense, then the penalty of rupees 10,000. If this is a continuing offense, then rupees 10,000 plus 100 rupees per day from the second day, subject to maximum of rupees 25,000. Then a penalty of rupees 25,000 applies to any offense of the GST law that lacks a specifically prescribed penalty. So basically, these this is a general provision, and this applies to offenses which does not have a specific penalty prescribed, and it cannot be left off without any penal consequences. So section 125 is a general penalty provision under the GST law for cases where no separate penalty is prescribed under any of the acts or rules. As per this section, any person who contravenes any of the provisions of the Act or any rules made thereunder for which no penalty is separately provided for in this Act shall be liable to pay a penalty which may extend to rupees 25,000. Moving on, talking about the minor breaches under GST. So minor breach is a breach where the tax amount is less than rupees 5,000, or the errors which are easily rectifiable and are clearly made without any motive of fraud. There will be no substantial penalties for these minor breaches. So taking an example, say a company is filing its tax returns, and it misses a small invoice of rupees 5,000 while filing those tax returns. And then the authorities get to find that they missed an invoice, and where the tax amounted to say rupees 4,000. Now, if, as we discussed in the other previous sections, talking about the average penalty is rupees 10,000, and say the tax authorities issue a fine of rupees 10,000 for not accounting a tax amount which was equal to rupees 4,000. Isn't it unjust? So the lawmakers kept this point in mind and provided a relief for these minor breaches, and hence the transactions which involve the tax amount of less than 5,000 rupees, there will be no substantial penalties for these minor breaches, and the tax authorities may issue a warning in such cases. And this will be beneficial to businesses, especially the small and medium enterprises, who may make genuine mistakes, especially in the first few months of GST implementation. And being penalized for genuine errors will be a hard blow to them, who do not have as many resources as the larger organizations to adapt to GST. And hence, um, if they were penalized on these small tax amounts as well, then this would discourage them to file their tax returns to come under the ambit of GST. And hence, the lawmakers understood this, and for preventing this to happen, they introduced this provision as well. Then the penalty imposed under this act shall depend on the facts and circumstances of each case and shall be commensurate with the degree and severity of the breach. Then no penalty shall be imposed on any person without giving him an opportunity of being heard. This is the basic requirement of any law. There is always given an opportunity of being heard to the person against whom the offenses are made, the um, say basically the offense against the person who is charged with the offenses and against whom the penal provisions are being made, that person is always given an opportunity of being heard. Then the officer under this act shall, while imposing penalty in an order for a breach of any law, regulation, or procedural requirement, specify the nature of the breach and the application law, regulation, or procedure under which the amount of penalty for the breach has been specified. And the provisions of this section shall not apply in such cases where the penalty specified under this act is either a fixed sum or expressed as a fixed percentage. So moving forward, there can be a case where the goods are confiscated by the authorities. Certain offenses will lead to both a penalty and the confiscation of goods. The penalty will be 10,000 rupees or an amount equal to the tax evaded. These offenses are failing to account for the goods on which a person is liable to pay tax, supplying or receiving goods in breach of any provisions or rules with the intent to evade payment of tax, then supplying any goods liable to tax without registering, using a conveyance to deliver taxable goods in breach of any provisions or rules. Then this is the period of imprisonment given. Talking about the first type of offense, the offenses which are specified in the Act, in which the amount of tax evaded or ITC wrongly availed, utilized, or refund wrongly taken exceeds rupees 500 lakhs, that is, which exceeds rupees 5 crores. These are the cognizable offenses, and the period of maximum imprisonment and fine is 5 years plus fine, um, uh, which is basically specified or which is arrived on by the authorities which are undertaking the case. Then in terms of fine, all the fines are those fines which are case specific and which are arrived onto by the authorities which are looking onto the matters of fines. Then the offences in which the amount of tax exceeds rupees 200 lakhs but is up to 500 lakhs, the period of imprisonment is up to 3 years. Then any other offences in which the amount of tax exceeds rupees 100 lakhs but is up to 200 lakhs, the period of maximum imprisonment is 1 year. Then the other offenses are in which a person commits or assists in the commission of certain specified offenses. The period of maximum imprisonment is 6 months. Then if there is any repetition of offense, that is, the person is repeating the offense in its like second time or every subsequent offense, the period of maximum imprisonment is 5 years. So thank you. So just giving you an overview of what all we discussed. We discussed why there is a need to insert the provisions of offenses and penalties. Then we discussed some of these sections like sections 122, 122 subsection, and specifically in section 122, we discussed subsection 1, subsection 2, subsection 3, then um, subsection 5. Then we also discussed section 123, section 124, section 125, which was relating to the general provision of penalties. Then we also talked about section 132, subsection 4 and 5, which enumerated the provisions regarding to cognizable and non-cognizable offenses. And we also discussed the cases of confiscation of goods and the terms of imprisonment in as penalties for the offenses that are made under the CGST Act. So I hope that you all enjoyed this video. It was informative for you. And if you have any suggestions or any additions that you want to make, then you can leave it down in the comment section below. Thank you guys. Have a good day.